Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to give an analysis of today's President Museveni's State of the Nation address. My argument would be that during his State of Address, we identified quite a number of issues, but majorly five, in my opinion, in terms of economic stability, peace, infrastructure, human resource development, wealth creation, job creation, market access, and I'm going to give an analysis of some of the things that they argued, for example, peace to start with. He highlighted the end of a 20-year civil war, reduced activities in terms of ADF, Congo, cattle rustlers in Karamoja. However, we could also argue that there's been recent increased lawfulness. The argument of many people being, vandalized, beaten left, right, and center, corrupt elements in the police, and therefore this needs, in my opinion, a lot of redress. In terms of infrastructure development, you could argue that the president noted that improvement in paved road network, for example, stressed the importance of infrastructure in terms of reducing business costs, thus ensuring profitability. But in my opinion, there's continued need for projects in terms of development of other infrastructures like electricity that would lower, business costs. He also argued in terms of resource development. I would argue that he cited improvements in terms of life expectancy and even literacy attributed to increased immunization and even educational facilities. The argument would be that further investment, in my opinion, in as far as education is concerned and healthcare could actually be, improved in terms of improving the quality of the population. He argued in terms of wealth creation, job creation, for example, despite acknowledging reasonable rise in wealth levels, challenging such as youth unemployment still persists. And therefore, the creation of employment avenues in both formal and informal sectors would actually be specific intervention in terms of supporting youth projects would actually be relevant in terms of skill development, employability. And then he argued in terms of market access. Notably, we could argue that the importance of market access can actually be inferred from the emphasis of infrastructure and even economic development. You could argue that infrastructure is important and therefore reducing business costs would actually facilitate better market access, in my opinion. And then in terms of critiquing for purposes of improvement, we could argue that certain aspects have to be, argued. Well, some initiatives are commendable. There are areas that we could actually emphasize in terms of more specificity or more address. For example, addressing lawlessness. So reliance on surveillance cameras may not fully address underlying issues of lawlessness. We have to argue in terms of implementation of a comprehensive approach in terms of improving community policing, for example, intelligence gathering, judicial reforms, swift and fair trials, addressing the root cause of crime such as poverty and unemployment becomes substantially important, in my opinion. You could also argue in terms of infrastructure development. We could focus on, road network and electricity is crucial, but broader infrastructure needs healthcare, education, even digital infrastructure in terms of consideration. So diversity infrastructure development could actually include a broad-based internet access to support the digital economy, improved healthcare facilities, and even affordable housing projects. And then you could also argue in terms of human resource development. While improvements in literacy and life acceptance are actually noted, quality of education and healthcare services actually remain a concern. So I would argue that we would enhance teacher training programs, invest in technology for education, increase healthcare funding, improve rural healthcare facilities, implement policies that retain professionals within the country rather than export so many of them to Dubai and the likes. Argument in terms of wealth and job creation. General statements about creating employment need more concrete plans rather than just hear hula balloons, for example. We need to develop industry-specific skill development programs, promote entrepreneurship, accessing credibility in terms of business, creating economic zones, and even investment, and even generate employment. And then you could also argue in terms of market access. Market access strategies were not detailed, in my opinion. We need to strengthen regional trade agreements in terms of investing logistics and also transportation networks, reduce bureaucratic hurdles for business, and leverage digital platforms for our market economy. I would argue that the President's address outlined, in my opinion, critical areas for Uganda's economic stability, but lacked detailed strategies for effective implementation. And therefore, by adopting, in my opinion, a multifaceted approach for peace and law enforcement in terms of diversification infrastructure, investment, enhancing human resource development, implementing job creation programs, improving market access, Uganda can achieve more sustainable and inclusive economic growth. If you could argue in terms of specific omissions, in my opinion, as far as his address was concerned, I could argue certain substantive key areas that, in my opinion, were gray, for lack of a better word. And I'm going to give you an analysis of some of these omissions and why they are crucial and why, in my opinion, they ought to have been, addressed. the country's direction in infrastructure development, for example. Effective transportation networks are vital for economic development, facilitating trade and even improving connectivity within the country. So without a clear infrastructure strategy, Uganda risks falling behind in development and even maintenance of critical transportation routes. And the mission impact is that the lack of specific plans for upgrading road infrastructure raises concerns about future development and even sustainability. So efficient infrastructure reduces costs for business and improves access to markets, which is crucial for economic stability. That is something that you ought to have understood. Also, in terms of internal security and fighting terrorism, yes, rising security threat in the region, for example, we need a robust plan in terms of enhancing intelligence capabilities, law enforcement initiatives are imperative. We need to maintain security and protecting citizens from terrorism and even other threats. So the absence of a detailed strategy to bolster internal security and even combat terrorism, even these so-called, what do you call them, these karate guys who keep hitting guys left, right, and center, I think that becomes substantially important. How many times have we seen these guys on WhatsApp, on media platforms? We need to address that. How about strengthening the health sector? It becomes very vital in terms of improving, adequate funding for staffing and medical supplies that are crucial for effective healthcare delivery. Yeah, without concrete measures addressing these challenges as far as health facilities in the country is concerned, leaves Uganda in a vulnerable condition, as far as I'm concerned. And then we could also argue in terms of, measures to limit what they call external and domestic borrowing. Uganda has a tune about 7.4 trillion debt. Uganda's increase in debt is critical in terms of economic stability, and therefore progress towards middle income status becomes a mirage, or a dream for that. So we need to avoid pitfalls of excessive borrowing, and the lack of strategies to curb borrowing leaves Uganda at risk of economic instability. Responsible fiscal planning is essential for sustainable development and even maintaining investor confidence. And therefore, these are issues that should, in my opinion, ought to be addressed. How about issues to do with the outcries of the fishery sector that had to do with, as a source of livelihood for many Ugandans, challenging overfishing, for example, and then declining fish stocks. Those are things that are important for food security and livelihood of many people. Neglecting fishery sector could actually lead to environmental degradation and even economic loss. So therefore, comprehensive policies to support sustainable fishing practices and protect aquatic ecosystem become a question of urgency as far as we're concerned. And then the issue of environmental conservation and protection. We could argue that environmental conservation and protection are crucial for addressing climate change and even preventing environmental degradation. So implementing and enforcing policies that actually safeguard natural resources, promote sustainable development, and even protects biodiversity. In my opinion, ignoring environmental conservation risks exacerbating climate change impacts and losing natural heritage. So sustainable environment policies are necessary to ensure the healthy environment for current and future generations. In my opinion, we need improved solutions and recommendations. I would argue the following as far as, in terms of infrastructure development, for example, develop a comprehensive infrastructure plan that includes not only roads, but also railways, ports, and digital infrastructure. Prioritize projects that enhance regional connectivity and business tools. I would argue implementing a public, private partnership model to attract investment infrastructure to protect and even project and ensure and continue maintenance. I would argue in terms of internal security and even fighting terrorism, for example. I would argue in terms of establishing a multi-tiered security strategy that includes enhancing intelligence capabilities, community policing, for example, combating terrorism and other security threats, for example. I would argue in terms of investing in modern technology, even though we have the so-called Big Brother. But the argument is that the effectiveness of these things, when you go back to retrieve, they say they are deleted, they're not there, or they're not working, or they're just what? Scarecrows. I would argue in terms of improved budget allocation for healthcare, focusing on building and equipping in terms of robust healthcare, addressing staffing shortages, strengthening public-private partnership in health sector to improve service delivery and to ensure access to quality health across the country. In terms of debt management, my goodness, this is what eats us most. It is the biggest devil, if you like, that we have. Develop a clear management strategy that focuses on unnecessary borrowing and increasing and enhancing fiscal discipline. Establish a debt management office to oversee and coordinate borrowing, repayment plans, and ensuring that they align with sustainable development goals. Even before we begin going out for people like other people, individuals, let's address that. Fisheries. As a comprehensive sector in our country, we need sustainable fishing techniques to protect fish stocks through conservation measures. I would argue in terms of engaging local communities in terms of conservation efforts, provide training and even support for alternative livelihood and even reduce dependency on overfish products. In terms of environmental conservation, for example, I would argue in terms of enforcing existing environmental laws and even creating new policies that address deforestation, water pollution, land degradation, promote reforestation, and even sustainable land use practices. I would argue in terms of launching nationwide awareness campaigns on environmental conservation and even providing incentives for business and communities that actually adopt sustainable practices. My argument would be, Mr. President, your address touched on key issues, yes, significant issues, yes, but there is need for immediate attention that certain things were overlooked. So addressing infrastructure, for example, internal security, health sector, improvement, debt management, fish support, environmental conservation, and corruption. I know you said you had your argument of corruption. In my opinion, we can just simply say that we're going to deal with corrupt people in the way you want it to be. A corrupt person is corrupt from the word go, and I mean it has to be called a spade and not a big spoon. So that will be my submission as far as today's State of Nation address. God bless you. My name is Isaac Christopher Lubogo. Thank you.